Hello, and welcome to Fighting for Environmental Justice in 2025 and beyond. My name is Alex Ross, and I'm the Grassroots Organizing Project Manager here at EDF Action. And as the advocacy partner for the Environmental Defense Fund, we work to build political power to protect our environment and the health of American families. EDF Action can really step in and participate in legislative advocacy in cases where EDF, as a charity, has to stand down. So we focus on science, law, and technology to advance good public policy that leads to action on climate. I'm so excited for our conversation this evening. Since President Trump took office in January, his administration has all but blacklisted environmental justice efforts. And let's be clear, environmental justice isn't just a buzzword. It means remedying environmental harms that have been purposefully or incidentally imposed on specific communities and preventing similar injustices from happening in the future. This includes things like independent air monitoring, regulations on toxic chemical plants, and strong protections that keep our water clean. I think those are the most important things to remember. And so I welcome you to engage in our conversation this evening by sharing your thoughts in the chat and the comments wherever you're watching from. We'll have some time for a short Q&A towards the end. So if you have any questions, please share them and we'll get to as many as possible. With that, I'd like to welcome our first guest this evening, Asia Guest from the Frontline Resource Institute. Asia serves as the program coordinator for the Office of Community Engagement and Collaboration, the grantee strategic convener for the Frontline Resource Institute, and the global partnership manager for justice and equity at the Environmental Defense Fund. In these roles, she leads high-impact community engagement, DEI, and justice-centered strategies that strengthen frontline communities, support elected officials, and advance global partnerships dedicated to climate resilience and equity. So welcome, Asia.
Hi, Alex. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Looking forward to a great conversation. And without further ado, I'll give a little bit about myself. Alex already hinted on it, but
I about the Frontline Resource Institute.
Yeah, so I have the esteemed pleasure of serving as the partnership manager at the Frontline Resource Institute. And what that looks like is I get to be a partner to community-based organizations across the globe, meaning I get to help them connect the dots when it comes to funding, strategic planning, and my favorite, which I'm currently working on now, is assisting these organizations with storytelling. Because with all the adversity that we are currently facing, storytelling is more important more than ever at this point. And so I have the esteemed pleasure of connecting the dots for organizations across the globe.
And thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
And I will also introduce our next. I think we're having some technical issues. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, now I can. Okay, now I am going to introduce Andrea Vidaurre. Andrea grew up in an unceded territories of the Tongava, also known as the Inland Empire of Southern California. Over the past couple of years, she has worked on environmental justice issues throughout the Inland Empire and has helped pass landmark policies that are transforming our freight transportation system. She is the co-founder and policy analyst at the People's Collective for Environmental Justice, a community-based organization focused on fighting environmental racism. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. So,
yeah. I was wondering, before we get into the questions we have this evening, Andrea, if you could just tell us a little bit about the People's Collective for Environmental Justice.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just making sure there's not an echo. So hi, everybody. My name is Andrea. I grew up in what's called the Inland Empire, which is out here in Southern California. We're about an hour east of LA. There's been a lot of changes happening in the Inland Empire over the last 2 decades, especially through the growth of warehousing, trucking, and trains, and just overall logistics. We are one of the places that make next day delivery happen. And with that comes a huge price. And so in 2020, myself and some neighbors and community members started the People's Collective for Environmental Justice, which is a community-based organization. We are a collective of people, and our purpose is to fight environmental racism that we see in our communities and the over-industrialization and over-proliferation of logistics in our neighborhoods. And so we organize frontline communities living in front of rail yards, airports, freeways, and warehouses, like the ones back here. We organize them so that they can be part of changing policy, so that we can all have next day delivery without it harming our health, so that we can all have the things in our stores without it causing premature death and all those things. And so overall, fighting for zero emissions in the freight system.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Asia here for the conversation, but I will be back towards the end for our Q&A. So look forward to it. Thanks, y'all.
Okay, Andrea, let's get down to business. So I was thinking we could just, have a conversation about what we do, right? So, Andrea, what has been giving you hope recently?
Wow, that's a tough one. That's hard, right? It's so doom and gloom anywhere you look. I mean, I've been limiting my screen time. But I think regardless of that, I think what's been giving me hope is that amidst all of the chaos that's happening, both in the climate space and the EJ space and just in general in our neighborhoods, it's been really beautiful to see how people have been coming together to challenge all of this violence and aggression that's coming from the state. Most specifically, I'm in Southern California. I'm in a place where so many ICE raids are happening, where we've been targeted by the administration. And so the communities I help organize are immigrant communities. And so right now there's this extra layer of targeting that's happening. And so what gives me hope, though, is just seeing how folks have come together and are building these rapid response networks and are having these conversations and showing up when ICE is around and challenging that. So seeing that has been really beautiful and gives me hope that when our communities are attacked, we do really, stand up and fight back. So that's been really nice.
Yeah, I can totally agree. Working with a few community-based organizations. Recently in October, I hosted a convening in New Orleans, and it was great to see how even just 6 of these organizations in many different places, from Minnesota to Puerto Rico to Texas, just all coming together and fighting back and saying what might have worked, 50, 60 years ago, that ain't gonna work now. And so that's been something that's also been giving me hope as well. It's just to see that folks aren't just taking this and rolling over, like where people are actually standing up and saying, no, not in our community, especially in the EJ space. So I'm glad to hear that. So I really want to know more about you. So what was your first exposure to environmental justice and how did it inform your work?
So it's an interesting question, right? Because I feel like you learn what environmental justice was when I was in college, right? Like the term and what it means and the history behind it. But really when I learned about it, it was more so of a way for me to connect the dots of like how I grew up. And so if I really think about the first time I was exposed to EJ, it had to be when I was growing up. I lived in a neighborhood that I think if you step into that neighborhood now, you'd ask yourself, am I in an industrial neighborhood or am I in a residential neighborhood, right? There was like this steel plant right in front of where we lived. It was like a pretty active truck route. And now it's become just this giant warehouse hub. But even back then, right, it was, you weren't really sure what you were in. And so I didn't really understand that might have been EJ until my parents decided that they were going to like take me to school in another city. They were just like, we're going to go to school where, my comadre lives, right? It's a better school over there, whatever. And so my parents would drive me back and forth between these two neighborhoods. And it was like really clear difference between neighborhoods, right? This neighborhood was whiter, more affluent. This neighborhood also had like sidewalks and street lights and had no warehouses or trucking or anything like that, right? And so we would drive back and forth. When I would drive back home, it was like, okay, now there's not as many sidewalks and there isn't so much lighting and it's a lot more industrial, right? So I'd probably say my first exposure was growing up, just realizing, oh, neighborhoods can look really different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't, I think, until college that I realized things can look really different. And then you start to learn why, right? It's maybe based on how much people earn, their skin color, right? How close they, where they might live.
How you vote.
Right, exactly. Can they vote? And so that what I think was like, oh, I connected it. So I'd say I'd really learned about it when I got a little older, but it really was just like a reflection of before. So that's what brought me into the work, I think, was like, oh my God, like I know this feeling. I know what this is like. And, this isn't just a thing you read in textbooks or whatever. This is actually happening in real life right now, all the time, right? How we're creating more and more sacrifice communities like across the country and really across the world.
Got you. Yeah. That's interesting. And that's something that we see every day. And unfortunately are seeing more and more. If I had to think back, my first exposure was in St. James Parish in Louisiana. It was my first ever work trip at EDF. And I got to see that on this 7-mile road, every half a mile, there was a petrochemical facility.
Yep.
But what struck out to me was a playground. It was a school there. It was houses, not even like a real grocery store. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, are you kidding me? This is real. Because if you don't, I'm very a firm believer. I can tell you that this is an issue every day, but until you actually see it, smell it, breathe it, all the things, then it's not a real issue to you. So yes, I'm right there with you, getting my feet wet and boots on the ground in that aspect.
Yeah,
So,
I'm glad you went in person, like you were there in person, because you really don't know it unless you're in there, right? And you smell it, like you said, we don't smell or feel it, right? We have a lot of vibrations that you don't think about because we're so close to trains and trucks, and so be in it. And so, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, exactly. So we are seeing the words of environmental justice, literally being removed from federal government websites. Where do we go to continue this work?
Yeah, where do we go? I think, it's, of course, it's hard to see that EJ is being taken out of our federal stuff. But, I really do think back, like, we don't necessarily need the government to validate the experiences of our communities. Like, I think there has just been such a long history of communities fighting for environmental justice throughout the country that have proven it. It's like so undeniable now. And sure, they can take down the name, they can take down the term, but they can't take down like this entire movement for environmental justice that I think is probably at its strongest point ever, right? Like, used to be this small movement, perhaps of folks, has really grown into something that has been inserted everywhere, right? And even in the last administration, every single agency and department had to address it in one way. And we just don't lose that. Of course, I think it does feel like kind of a dip right now because they're so against it, and they're even like criminalizing, right, the word of environmental justice, and taking away resources if you're talking about climate change, which is very real. But I also think that there is just so much done, and it's an opportunity for us to maybe work on our other institutions, right? Continue to push environmental justice through our other institutions, like our health institutions, our education institutions, and even our like local agencies. I think right now it's hard to move things federally, of course, but there are these other places where I don't think environmental justice is just going to stop. Now, I do say that as someone from California, who I know the politics can be different, but still, right? Like we're in partnership with other groups, other EJ groups impacted by freight, part of a thing called the Moving Forward Network. So we've got partners in the South and got partners in more conservative areas. And so I know that just doesn't die down, right? So those folks are rolling now more than ever. So I think that's where we have to go, is just what other agencies, what other cities, what other how do we build also outside of it, right? research institutions and stuff.
Yeah, one of the approaches that I've been talking to with some of the organizations that I work with is yes, the federal government is up there, but we also have local and state. Like, your local, like your mayors are in charge of your city roads and infrastructure, stormwater drains. If you've got flooding, those types of things. So the federal government is not the end all and be all to everything. And if we get people out to vote, hey, I mean, it's not rocket science. So
yep. And I think right now is the time where you see so much local work happening. And for me, that's really important because these big power plants, these data centers, as I'm seeing in the chat, right? These warehouses like up in my area, like those all go through city planning. And we forget so much of our air quality, water quality, soil quality is decided by our local government. And it could be something as easy like getting involved in your planning processes, getting involved when your budget happens, etc. Like those are places to advance EJ always.
Exactly. I tell people 90% of the work is just showing up. Go to those council meetings.
Right. Go to the council meeting.
Go to your supervisors. Go listen. I mean, even if it's something that, you didn't know that was happening, you could still talk about it. It can even just be a conversation. We put these people in these seats, right? So why can't we have a say so, So I am right there with you. And this is a perfect segue into our next question. What are environmental justice organizations doing during this administration? And how can folks support their own communities?
Yeah, I think folks are, I think what we're doing, and I think what a lot of organizations are doing right now is like, how are we base building? How are we continuing to organize, getting ourselves organized during this time? I think right now it is hard. Folks are struggling. But, folks were, some people had their funds taken away and not just that, but like a lot of times some of these community groups are not only responding to air and water quality stuff, they're also like food security with the loss of, all those resources, and also like all the loss of healthcare right now, right? Like there's these places that folks have to step into, and that's okay. Like I think it's a time to, how are we investing our time into mutual aid and at the same time connecting the dots, right? I think sometimes climate movement, we're not talking about how all this stuff is really intersectional, and how if we continue to have food deserts and we continue under-resourcing some of our communities and creating this inequity where certain places get a lot of benefits and then other places become sacrificed, really making people extra vulnerable in these times when the government's deciding to not do anything. So I think that's what a lot of us are spending time on. And I think that's how folks can really get involved, is like making sure like folks are showing up in ways of mutual aid and showing up for community organizations that are still, despite all of this, resisting all these rollbacks, right? Like, I mean, something that's really important for us is NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, which is getting back like everything else. It's not like we just stand there and have it be rolled back, right? You make a fuss, you still do public comments, you still enact, you still processes. That's important too.
I agree. One of the things that you said, which is really big, which is part of the conversations that I have, which is funding. And, when some of the TikToks were taken away and all these other federal resources, part of the conversation was not talking about, or that we are now talking about, is how to change the lens from just looking at federal funding. What about philanthropic? Like, there are not, we're seeing companies like, Target and AT&T turning around, turning and rolling back all these DEI policies, but not everybody is on that train. And so where are our allies and our resources other than the federal government, so that we can, keep the train rolling? And it is hard because, like you said, like food, healthcare, all these things are going on at one time. And a lot of these organizations don't have the capacity. One of the organizations that I work with, they have 3 people.
Yeah.
They have 3 people.
Doing the work of like 30. Yeah.
30, really 50. You know what I'm saying? And so like I'm totally there with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to add to that because I think it's important. I mean, you're right. There is like philanthropy right now. It's really important conversation to continue to invest in direct services and power building, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being able to support during this time. And sometimes when we're seeing that shift, I think that's why it's also important for us to think about how are individuals also engaging in donating and supporting some of this work. Even if you're not in maybe an impacted community or whatever, sometimes even getting support from outside goes a long way, right? And that is how we, I think, support this larger ecosystem for, systems change.
Right, for sure. All right. So, how has support for community-led solutions changed under the Trump administration?
So, I mean, a little obvious, but no, it's. I'll start with the disclaimer that like it wasn't perfect under Biden either. Like, I want to be clear about that. Like, it wasn't also perfect either. We definitely were really disappointed in the fact that we didn't get certain laws enacted under that administration, but it's okay. I still think a lot of work was done in the last administration that really shows us the potential, right? So that time around, we're taking that potential and we're going even stronger with that. But some things that I think are being rolled back now is pretty non-existent. That's really important for my work. So in my work, we're really concerned about air pollution issues from the freight system. And it really is what makes the entire country move, right? I mean, we don't have anything without it. And something that I think was really getting advanced in the last administration was like the research and innovation and even funding for electrification of the freight system, right? We heard a lot about like the EV mandates and electric vehicles and stuff, which is its own work for sure. But for us, it was also really important. Like, how are we getting our super out-to-date train system, like actually up to date and modernized with the rest of the world? Because the rest of the world moves freight on train in a way that's electric and clean, doesn't cause cancer clusters, right? And advancing truck technology and warehouse technology. And so that is something that I think is a community-led solution that we're not seeing being supported at all. I mean, you're seeing that it's become so political, right? Like an electric vehicle is so political. And it's really going to it's creating a lot of hesitancy for that market to continue to grow. And so that's something that I think is important that we continue to move regardless of the incentives and stuff. And because I think we were very successful in the last administration being able to show the importance of how we need a zero emission freight system. To the point that we had like this White House fact sheet at one point towards the end of the administration that said like we need to go zero emissions. And that was won by community, right? Coming in and fighting for that stuff. Now, right now, are we seeing that? No, but it's okay. Like, I think that's something that's something we're continue to fight. And we have to think challenge right now is such a big, like for us in the climate movement, I think it's really important to how do we address all this misinformation? Because I think that's what's happening a lot with community-led solutions, right? It's like community-led solution. A lot of the things that we've come up with are like totally being said, no, it's too expensive, doesn't work, unaffordable, whatever. And it's like, whoa. So battling misinformation right now, I think is really important.
Oh yeah, for sure. Most definitely. We're definitely at EDF having a lot of those conversations. Okay, cool. I have no comment. You perfectly said everything of how I felt. So I'm gonna go to the next question. What actions at the state and local level can we take to make sure that environmental justice keeps moving forward?
I mean, I think you talked about it like pretty well, right? Like, how do you engage locally, right? How do you how are we still making sure that things aren't rolling back? I'll just give an example here in California. Folks think California is really progressive and stuff, and they have their moments when they're not. And this past legislative year, it was a fight to make sure that we weren't also rolling back some of our regulations on freight that was matching what the federal government was doing. And so, and we were successful in some of that as well, but it took a fight, right? It's not just granted to us, right? I think we just need to actively be involved in a lot of this stuff. Getting involved in local elections, getting involved in planning, getting involved in just getting involved in some of our statewide stuff, I think is going to be important.
Right. And like I said, I've already hinted on this, but as I was thinking about our questions earlier today, a few things came to mind. Number one, staying persistent and keep on fighting. Not, just keep on with the keep on. Number two, again, I've already talked about this, but voting. Local elections are super important. State elections are super important. Show up. I have been in conversations with state legislators, and he explained to me that, again, like I've already hinted on, you can send an email, you can send a phone call, but if you come to my office and I see the emotion and the desperation for what you need on your face, it's going to impact me more than me sending your email or you calling my staffer who was going to say thank you and have a great day, right? So I'm gonna say with those things, stay persistent and keep on with fighting. And number two, definitely getting out to vote and getting, we can churches, schools, all the things, PTA, soccer games. I'm telling people these are the conversations y'all need to have, because if your kid is outside playing soccer and it's hot, or, y'all live a half a mile down the road from a petrochemical facility, you know what I'm saying? Or, the type of turf that these kids are playing on, anything, the drinking water, anything, everything, like you said earlier, environmental justice is very intersectional with pretty much in every facet of life. So I'm in total. I thank you for this conversation, Andrea. I am truly inspired by your words and looking forward to working with you.
Likewise. Yeah, likewise. I think it's just important for all of our different communities to be connecting. Yeah. I think they tend to do similar things to all of us. And I think we learn so much from just exchanging with each other. Mm-hmm. Sharing what things are working in your community can work in mine and vice versa. And honestly, in a time when, like I said, like social media and everything online feels really dreary, these moments, can pick you back up.
Oh, for sure. Exactly. I agree. All right, Alex, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Asia. And thank you, Andrea. It's a really great conversation. And so I will ask y'all to hang on for just a little while for our Q&A, but I'll go ahead and move over to our action ask, right? We're EDF action, so it wouldn't be our event without it. And to help preview and talk about sort of what's at stake, I have one of our lobby leads here joining us, Suhani Chitalia. Welcome. So happy to have you on.
Thanks, Alex. And I appreciate, everyone taking the time and being here today. As Alex mentioned, my name is Suhani Chitalia. I am with the Environmental Defense Fund on behalf of EDF Action, and I work on our federal affairs team on our two main portfolios, fuels and feedstocks, and also our healthy communities and chemicals work. I just want to start off by saying I really appreciate Asia and Andrea's sentiment about how important local activation and local work is. Just a little background on myself. I worked on environmental justice for a really long time. That's what I went to law school for. And a lot of my work prior to EDF was on zoning and supporting local counties develop environmental justice plans. And I also helped a number of communities fight back from some really awful facilities from being built like literally in their backyard. So I can't emphasize just how important zoning and local politics are. But moving on to what we're focused on today, I'm here to talk about the Toxic Substances Control Act. It's been a really, really hot topic for this year. It's also known as TSCA. It's our country's bedrock chemical safety law. It protects us all from chemicals that are quite literally in all of the products around us. This doesn't include like cosmetics and lotions and body products and pesticides and foods, those are handled separately. But if you just look at your desk, you have your keyboard, your laptop, your desk, the carpet, the chair, all of the items that go into these products that you surround yourself with go through TSCA. TSCA is particularly important because it serves as a gatekeeper for chemicals. And we know that workers, individuals with underlying health conditions like asthma, like myself, frontline and fence line communities, veterans, they're often the first to be exposed to these really dangerous and highly toxic chemicals. EDF is working really closely with our partners, our state teams, and we're also in coordination with a number of coalitions to ensure that TSCA remains a strong law that protects our most vulnerable populations. Many of you may have heard, but there's a number of ongoing attacks to TSCA, both in Congress, but also in the administration. The Toxics Department and EPA is currently being led by former chemical company lobbyists. And we've seen this administration push for automatic approvals for chemicals like PFAS, for the use of data centers, which was also mentioned by our previous speakers. They're also rolling back EPA's risk evaluation framework for existing chemicals. And a part of that is eliminating the consideration of susceptible populations. And EPA recently announced that they're reconsidering their formaldehyde risk evaluation. So these all are just really, really bad compounded impacts that are happening through the administration. Simultaneously, in Congress, the chemical lobby is working to reopen and weaken the Toxic Substances Control Act. Their wish list includes things like minimizing consideration of risks, allowing chemicals onto the market without adequate review and just kind of rubber stamping them, and also approving chemicals based on like a narrow set of uses and not considering where it may end up. So a chemical could be approved for use in like a really, really kind of closed system in an industrial plant, but they may approve it for that specific use, considering that it's a closed system and you have PPE, but that chemical very well could end up under your kitchen sink where you use it every day without the PPE and kind of closed system that a facility would provide. So all of these things in accumulation are just really, really problematic. The first to really feel the impacts of chemical exposures are our frontline and fence line communities, our workers, young children, and folks who are susceptible to chemical exposures due to existing health conditions. So EDF has created a number of resources and maps that we have shared with a lot of our local and state partners. And this includes things like our climate vulnerability index map, our polluter pest map, our chemical exposure map. In particular, a chemical exposure map is a really, really useful tool. It allows you to see which facilities are kind of in your backyard and which pollutants are being emitted. And these are all chemicals that would go through TSCA. So I would just like to emphasize that we really need to protect this statute. It was a really big improvement from what our chemical law once was. And it's important to continue to protect the health and environment within our homes and our communities. TSCA is really critical to what we do, and any rollbacks in this Congress would really undermine the purpose of the law, which is to ensure that chemicals don't risk public health. I'm happy to answer any questions, but it's just, TSCA is just top of mind for a lot of folks right now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Suhani, for that great sort of overview. I know it can be sort of in the weeds, and there's a lot of like, when the chemical names and the come out, that's when I start to feel a little self-conscious. I didn't do so well in high school chemistry. But yeah, I think it's really important that we protect these regulations. And so in the chat, we shared an action alert where you can go and send a message directly to your member of Congress, asking them to protect these standards and keep them in place. So please take a moment to do that. And while you do, I'll welcome back Asia and Andrea for our Q&A session. Awesome. So let's see. I have lots of questions here. And this first one I'll just address really quickly, was asking about, where can I learn more about some of these toxic chemical plants near me? And I know, Suhani, you had mentioned the chemical exposure action map, and we've shared that in the chat. But yeah, I guess, is that probably the best place for folks to go looking if they want to see where facilities are near them?
Yeah, I'd say the chemical exposure map is a really great resource. You can plug in I think you can put in your zip code and it'll populate a number of facilities that are surrounding you, and it'll provide you information on which chemicals are being emitted that would go through the TSCA process, and then how much of each chemical is also being emitted. So it is just packed full of some really great information.
Next question I wanted to address. Someone asks, I'm new to this and I'm wondering, how do we keep motivation up, especially when we feel ignored by the politicians who we have repeatedly contacted? And that's something we do a lot here at EDF Action. So I was wondering if anyone wants to take that question first.
I can answer. Wonderful question, by the way. But my advice to you would be keep on even when it feels like no one is listening. Show up when they want to answer your phone call or email. Go see if they're at their office. That I'm pretty sure they have an assistant, and then they're not there. Leave a note. Keep on being persistent, because I'm telling you, the more and more that the same person is popping up. This person keeps calling our office. Sooner or later, you will get through. But however, to really answer your question is always think of the reward at the end once you do get the result that you need, right? So always think of, if I keep on, what am I really working for? And once this happens, how am I going to feel? That's my advice.
Thanks. Andrea, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, everything that, Asia just said. But then I would just add that I think it's important to be persistent. And I know it can feel, I think sometimes we're like, I can't do it anymore. But that's why I think it's so important to do things in community and with your people. Like, and it doesn't have to be a lot of people, but just making sure you have a support network. Because some days it's going to weigh on us more than others. But then you're going to have that one, your neighbor, whoever else in your group is going to be like, no, let's go back. Like, we have to make them listen to us, and that kind of balance, like, I think is really important, because it's hard to be on every single day of, all the time. So I think that's important. And then the other one is folks respond to pressure, right? And I think sometimes when you feel like you're not being listened to or ignored, I think, we take the route in, what are the ways to make sure you are going to listen? And sometimes it means packing out their meetings. Sometimes it means showing up in the same color t-shirt. Sometimes it means bringing a sign, right? Like, what does it mean? Like, and how do you escalate your tactics, right? So that you can get heard, because unfortunately it's not always going to be, they're going to listen. But I think it's been proven that when folks get together and are really loud together, that it's kind of hard to ignore.
Definitely. And I think that's one of the great things about kind of building power through the environmental movement, right? Is we may have some bad days, but there's enough of us to pick up the slack when you're feeling down. So I think it's all about working together to get to that goal, right, that Asia was mentioning. So, honey, I'm curious if you can answer this one. Someone asks, what happens when there's no announcement for your community about environmental policies, or where do you look online for that sort of information about, like, maybe proposed plants and sort of air permitting happening, in your community? Where do you recommend folks sort of go to look for some of those things?
Alex, you said this was for me?
Yes.
Okay.
If you're up for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think like back in my, to my days where I worked more on a local level, but often I live in the state of Maryland, and I just tend to keep up with like a lot of our environmental work and news just through it's the Maryland Department of the Environment website. There's a subscription, and then they just provide you updates for any kind of upcoming like permitting or town halls that are happening around certain environmental projects. It's tedious, it's not fun, but it is super critical. And I will say that like I think a lot of word gets around, especially on a local level, like through your community. I've just like plugged into like sustainability groups that were existent in, I live in Baltimore City, which has a ton of pollution, really big facilities, some nasty plants. I have asthma, so I'm always keeping track of everything that's popping up around me. So I just kind of tune into any kind of like local sustainability talks that are happening. My city has an office of sustainability that has like, I want to say bi-monthly meetings that I usually just kind of keep track of notes. It's work. It's something that nobody wants to do on top of their job and their family and their kids, but it is a way to kind of just quickly get a run of show for like what's happening. I will say on a national level, it's complicated. Right now, the EPA has had like a number of guidances and rollbacks, etc. A lot of that is kind of just like through the news, but you can find it through government websites as well. The EPA does provide kind of information on different guidances that they are looking at or reconsidering or reevaluating. So the EPA website is also a really great resource to just kind of figure out what the administration is planning on doing next.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I know it can definitely be tough to keep up with everything. And even, in this job, right, it feels sometimes challenging, and it's what we do. So we are kind of getting towards the end of our program, but I wanted to ask Andrea, Asia, Suhani, if y'all have any final thoughts you wanted to share with folks before we wrap up.
I can go. I mean, I get mine. I just want to leave on a positive note and just say like we're gonna be okay. But we're gonna be okay if we don't let up. So I think folks, just the fact that you're here watching this is huge. It means you care. It means like you want to see better. And I think the more we have people like that working together, the better we're gonna be for it. So, just keep on. And right now is not the time to let up. So that's it.
I will say again, thank you guys for being here. And I understand that, it's a lot of things going on. It's 6-something in my world on a Thursday night. Life is life, and then football is on in just a few. So I will say thank you guys for coming. But to answer the question is, again, we will be all right, just like Kendrick Lamar says. And I encourage you all to keep on the good fight and get in some good trouble.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you all so much for tuning in. It was really such a delight. And thank you, Andrea, Asia, Suhani, all for joining us this evening. And stay tuned for our next event. We'll be back probably in the new year. But thank you so much for joining. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.